Good afternoon, everybody. It is Tim Gillette, and welcome to another episode of the Tim Gillette Show, where we have real conversations with real influencers. This show is designed for me to actually get to know people, all right, see what kind of people they are, how they're changing the world, and in many cases, I don't even know the person until we come on camera the day of the interview. Today's guest, Shifra, all right, and I'm going to tell you, we're probably going to talk about her name because I was like, her name is just so shall we say exotic, all right, that you know what I mean. I was worried I was going to mispronounce it a couple times, but I won't. I promised her I won't mispronounce it. I practiced and made sure. But she is someone who is changing the world. She is a real influencer, and we're going to find out a lot about her, and I'm going to get to meet her just like you are today. Let's bring her up here and find out all about her. Well, hello, Shifra. How are you?
Hello, Tim. It is a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
It is all right because it's one of those things. I don't know you. I don't even know how we found each other, but that is the great part about my show. Is today I'm probably going to do it a couple times because I don't know your story.
Well, I'll be very happy to share whatever you want to know. Nothing is off limits.
Nothing is off limits.
Well,
okay,
almost nothing.
Well, my mom told me there's certain questions you don't ask a girl on camera. So I'm going to put them off limits because my mom told me.
Always listen to your mom.
So, and my mom's been on my podcast too. So Shifra, we talked a little bit in the green room before we went live here today. You're from the East Coast.
Baltimore.
Did you grow up in Baltimore or you grew up on the East Coast?
Born, bred, and buttered in Baltimore.
Wow. But, I assume that you've by some of the stuff I've read on your site that you've traveled the world. Is that true?
I have traveled. I've traveled. When I travel internationally, it's usually to Israel. I have family there, and it's a very meaningful place for me. And but I've been around.
Mm-hmm. Baltimore now, I grew up in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, but then lived in my beginning of my adult life in the Philly area. And many a times we went to we used to go every Christmas to the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. And we used to stay, it was the Hyatt. I remember we stayed at the Hyatt every year. You can overlook from your right hotel room. You can overlook the harbor. It was so cool. And the last time I visited it's got to be 2014, 2015. All right. With my wife was out there for a convention at the same hotel in the same ballroom that I used to do events with somebody in the early 90s. I was like, wow, what a change in life. So, have you done like events and stuff in downtown Baltimore, or do you guys go down there and check that out?
Yeah, sure. We'll go down just to visit, and see around the water. And there's some paddle boating now, and you could take a horse and buggy around.
Oh wow!
The Barnes and Noble.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about the harbor, I think a little bit larger about Fort McHenry and the our Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of history in Baltimore.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got the whole story with the Star Spangled Banner, where Francis Scott Key didn't know what he was going to find when he woke up that morning, and he looked and he saw that flag was still there, and was so moved to bring us an anthem that we still have to this day. And I guess I'm thinking about it because I have the whole world situation on my mind, as I'm sure we all do.
Yeah.
And the Ukrainians fighting for what's theirs.
And it's and I don't like to get into world affairs, but in world affairs, it's like, it's the place you live signifies the freedom of America.
Yeah.
And right now the Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom. And I love that. I love to find people like that who've got that burn of passion in their life. And you are in a part of the country that there is a passion, a history, and I've always loved that about Baltimore area. In Philadelphia too. I mean, when I went through downtown Philadelphia, I still get tears in my eyes walking by the Liberty Bell and stuff like that, Independence Hall and stuff like that down there. But it's been years since I've been there. So,
yeah. Yeah, I was in Philadelphia not too long ago, actually at the Children's Hospital. It's an amazing place. We had a family relative there. So that was my last time in Philly. But yeah, they say when you go and conquer a city and you want to subdue people, you only enclose them on three sides, because if you enclose them on all four, they will find resources and a capacity they never knew they had, and they will overcome.
That's right.
So, and that's just, it holds true across the board, even if you're not in a war with another country, but in our daily lives, just finding the resources and the capacity to overcome and prevail and grow.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. All right. In the world of influence, like I could sit you're on a show because you're an influencer. All right. The influence you have among women, all right, in our country, teaching them some of the, not land wise, but teaching them emotion wise, life wise. You're going to find the same resources once you're backed into a corner. All right. And I assume that's part of what you do.
Yeah. So as you can see, the book that I wrote is Dare to Matter, Lessons in Living a Large Life. And very often we are backed into a corner, whether we didn't mean to do it, but we did it to ourselves, or very, very often it was done to us. And we need to summon all of our resilience to just push back. In my particular case, this is a book that I wrote. I didn't start out to write this book. I started writing a book about interviews that I had done as a radio producer and interviewer. I love to interview people, as you do. And I never met a person, I don't think, who I couldn't speak to, who didn't want to tell me part of their story, if not the whole thing. In fact, sometimes I don't even ask them and they tell it to me. So I sat down to write those interviews, and what came through on the page was a completely different story. It astounded me, and I went with it because even though it was very personal, it's a hybrid of a memoir and self-leadership principles. The people around me just said, forget your interview, forget that whole thing, right to the heart of the pain, and you'll have your story. And that's what I did. And it came out very quickly. I had the story within really a few weeks, a few months. Of course, it took time to edit it and refine it. This is a story with the core message of mattering, that we can't buy or borrow our mattering, but we can create it. We must create it, and we will find the resources to do so. And after the book came out, I began to expand around the message, and I began to teach a curriculum called Women Speak. Women Speak is a singular program that helps women to clarify their messages, stand in their message with all the confidence and competence and courage that it takes, and to it is in a way, it's like Toastmasters, which I went to, but it's very different. First of all, it's for women only, but also it's a different culture. It's a culture of celebration, not competition. We don't have critique, we have refinements. There's a whole language around the way we do this, which allows the women to be in a very safe environment, a very supported environment, which is what it takes to be able to really leverage our particular influence that we are here to spread.
Did you find while writing the book, all right, and you said, number one, your story changed, your message changed through the writing process. Did you find, when I did my first book, it caused me to really dig deeper into my values, my core values of what I really believed. And it helped me find more values that I didn't know I had. Did you find that while in your process?
For me, the message came up so clearly and so completely and so fully and readily. But yes, of course, there are two chapters that, because of them, I almost dropped the entire project and said, I am done. Like the uncooperative child that I was, this is how these chapters were. And it was because I had to sit and dig and drill, and it was so demanding of my own depth. And I can go deep, but this really pushed me to put it into language. If you cannot put something into language, as far as I'm concerned, you don't know it. And you certainly can't have others know it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's getting your voice, you know what I mean? If you don't know what your voice is, why are you speaking? You know,
at our core is our voice.
Yeah.
And when that's compromised, then you're not standing in your own power that was given to you divinely.
So, you know, you spent years doing interviews, all right, doing radio shows that you said, all right. Are you still working in radio? And was it terrestrial radio, or was it the internet radio?
It was traditional radio. I went into a studio. It was a once a week live program. It was designed around social and educational initiatives. I had the opportunity to speak with celebrated authors and entrepreneurs and educators and researchers and artists. And I was able to extract from them various nuggets about what really made their lives worth living, what made them matter. It spoke to me personally and professionally, and I wanted to give it over to others as well, to share it. So yeah, I went in the studio, and it was an hour-long program, and I produced it. At the time, I had a writing and communications company, which is it came under that rubric. And yeah.
It's just you were. So what was the station you were on in Baltimore? I assume it was Baltimore, huh?
It aired in the Mid-Atlantic states.
Okay.
And I think the call channel was, I want to say 105.7. It was the one that carried the Ravens.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't remember off the top of my head anymore. It was a few years back.
Well, I mean, the reason I ask is in the early 90s, I worked promotions as one of a part-time jobs with a radio station in Philadelphia. So I still know some radio people in that part of the country, as a matter of fact. In Philadelphia, I don't know him personally, but I still know John DeBella is still on the air. And Pierre Robert were two radio personalities as a kid that drove me to actually want to do this and be on radio and doing interviews. And I didn't do terrestrial radio. I had internet. I was on an internet radio station out of Arizona for a couple of years. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed radio. Thoroughly, totally. Yeah. And I tell the story in my book I have one chapter about being in the studio, and it was my second program. And the sound engineer said, okay, you have about 5 seconds and then you're going to be on. And he said, but also this particular segment was a pre-recorded because it was with somebody in another country. They were on a different time zone. So we had to pre-record it. And he said, and I can't get it to work. I'm like, well, what do you mean you can't get it to work? We're going live in 5 seconds. He said, welcome to live radio. And there I was with my microphone and no track to play. Luckily, I had my notes in front of me. And you know what? I loved it. It was so unrehearsed. It was so authentic. And then we got the track to work. So that was good. But I remember those minutes out of all of my minutes as I love them. Some of my most favorite.
Mine was when I first was on the radio station in Arizona, we would broadcast from the house, not my house I'm in now, it was the other one I was in before this. And my daughter lived close by. She lives in Philly now, but she would come over and she would co-host. She'd be my co-host. Well, like the third or fourth broadcast we did with them, the cat walked under and hit the button that shut off the computer and everything. Right? Like 3 minutes into the broadcast, I said to my daughter, grab the phone, call the station, get Ed on the phone. So you're doing the call from her cell phone while I'm rebooting the computer.
Yes, that's what we call
That's the one I remember.
Yeah, that's what we call a nightmare, but you live through it.
Yeah. It was just, I mean, those things are just, those are the weird things you remember. All right. We lost in 2017. We lost my producer. My producer ended her life in 2017. And it's funny because, I was on the air with her for a year and a half. She became one of my best friends after the show. And those are connections. Like I'm still friends with everybody from that studio. I just don't do my show there anymore. And it's just, it's funny the relationships you make in radio, because you have no idea how much of an influence you have until you get to know a couple producers. And then you realize that this producer is now in, Seattle, Washington. And
yeah. Well, in truth, Tim, we never really know who we influence anywhere.
True.
Um,
That is probably the biggest true statement right there.
I want to tell you something. I was once in New York, up in the mountains one summer. We had a son in camp, and I did something. I don't want to go into exactly what I did. And after that, somebody came over to me. She said, I was in the car and I was watching you, and I want you to know that you had a profound influence on me, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Did I know anybody was sitting in the car watching me do something? No. And I would have never known had she not taken the generous gesture of coming over to me and telling me that.
Yeah.
It was very nice of her, but I didn't need to hear that. And she, but we'd never really know how far something we do. And sometimes it's the quietest things that go the furthest and have the deepest influence.
Yeah, it is. All right. And like I said, my influence, like we said, the radio moments we remember. I've interviewed 1,000 people to date. All right. I've done hundreds of shows, both there and podcast format. And it's the one dumb thing that I remember. The rest of the world doesn't remember it at all. I do. We remember those most insignificant things. But that goes, again, all right, taking what we started to do earlier, and you relate that to the outer world, is some of the most insignificant things to you can make the world of difference to someone. I lost my producer. She ended her own life. And I seen the stuff she put on social media 3 minutes before she did. And I had the intuition to go, you should call her. And I didn't. What if I did? I don't know. We don't know that. And sometimes it's those insignificant little moments, maybe a phone call, all right, that will make a world of difference to someone. And we don't know who it is or what it is, or if they're staring and watching us in their car.
I'm just curious. Was that a surprise for you? I know I'm not the interviewer, but I just have to ask you, was that a surprise for you?
It was a shock. It was a shock.
So you worked with somebody and you had no idea.
I had no idea. The post, she was going through a tough time, and the post that she put up was just like typical tough time. And I'm like, and part of me was like, man, I should call her. And I just, something came and I came up, and I just set the phone down, and I never went back to do it. And it was 24 hours later, another radio show host from that station called me and told me, and that's how I found out. Yeah. So, but, it's little things that influence your life along that. All right. This past summer, I got to interview a friend that moved to Dallas in 2003. And I met him at a Bible study at church. And he was like trying to figure out what he was going to do, sleeping in his car. And I let him stay on my couch. He would go on to run video for several Christian ministries here in Dallas for years, and tour the world as a videographer and making movies out of stuff like that. And he was on my podcast in August, and October he passed away. My podcast was the last thing he did. So, that's influence. All right. I didn't know, but had him and I not reached out together to connect again in July, he would have never been on my podcast. I wouldn't have had that one good conversation with him left. And now I've got it, and I got it recorded.
So valuable. And by the way, I just have to tell you, Dallas, I don't know why I didn't tell you this before.
Yeah.
I came to Dallas for the first time a few years ago. One of my children said that it was like a winter break, and she's like, you have to take us somewhere. We found the cheapest tickets that we could find, and we went to Dallas. And the first thing we did when we got off the plane was we went to some cafe to eat. And in there was a man who has subsequently, because he paid for our lunch. We never saw. He paid a random kindness, and we became very good friends after that. Mm-hmm. So I have good, nice memories.
Good vibes.
Yeah. I'm going to come back.
Yeah, good. Well, you say that. All right. Like when we fly, because I'm from the Northeast, my wife does a lot of business in around the world, around the country. And so she's traveling a lot. We fly Southwest, and every time we had to go to Philly, we always fly into Baltimore. So that BWI to Dallas Love Field is like a great connection that we've loved over the years. And I have an uncle who lives down Virginia Beach, and we still fly into BWI, and then we go from there. Maybe we'll get another flight into into Virginia, but usually we've driven from there out because that's just the main hub where we know we can get rental cars. We know it's
right
5 hours from the Poconos at most, Yeah.
Speaking of Southwest, sorry, I got to tell you something. I was on a trip to LA last year for a wedding, and we took a picture of 2 Southwest attendants holding my book, the Dear
Wow.
book. So we said "Flying High" was the name of the post.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I assume not. I didn't ask yet. Is this your only book, or have you done more than one?
This is my first.
First, okay.
My first book, and you know how if you have more books inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
I have more books inside of me. I even know what they're called. I just need to have the opportunity to be able to write them. As you know, it really requires a certain space in your life and in your overall mindset to be able to take the time and just go into it.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't have that, but I'm looking forward to having that space.
So yeah, and that's what I did when I did my first one. So I don't have like none of the other ones. They're not in print. This is my first one. It's still here. And my original brand was Rocker Life Coach, that was my original logo. That was my original laptop when I started my business. But my series was rock and roll songs that motivation was. You can't always get what you want. Not going to take it anymore. Taking care of business. So that was my first book series. And it's something. I wrote that book in 3 weeks. It took me eight months to publish it and get it edited, but I wrote it in 3 weeks. Same thing as you, I'm sure. Well, how long did it take you to write?
The main story really came up in, I would say, less than 2 months.
Less than 2 months, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I expanded, of course, but it was all there. It was all there.
And I found that though the people who actually have it into them, the key that I had to find. I don't know how big your book is, but mine is a 96-page book, and my mentor. He hit me with this when I met him. He talked about doing books. He says he realized that he can do small books. He didn't have to make this large book out of something.
So I'll answer your question. This is my book. It's 340 pages. It's a big book.
Yeah, it's a big book.
Honestly, I thought about making it into 2, and I spoke to the editor, the publisher, and they said, "No, Shifra, we really want it all as one book. It all comes together. It's actually divided into 2 sections." So that was a decision, that a strategic decision, or not even strategic. It just seemed like it should all go together. So.
Well, that's it. I mean, you know what I mean? Each one's different. For you, it was sitting down and being able to put the story down because you knew you were going to do it. Me, I had spent 9 years trying to write the big book, and frustrated, and laptops stolen, and computer crashes, and
all the challenges along the way. Yeah.
And it's like, finally my coach says, well, just write a small book, maybe take that big idea and break it down into several books and just do one set of small books. And now I'm doing a whole new series on Simple Easy Marketing. And it's because it's my new trademark and everything. But had I not wrote that first book, and that first book has nothing to do with what I do now. But had I not finished that, I wouldn't be where I was at. I would still be laptop crashed. Oh, well, that book's gone again. You know what I mean? And it's funny how God has a way of helping us get things done. All right. That message was not a relevant message, but it was relevant for me to finish it. You know what I mean? Your message for you, because you got it done faster in a bigger book, was a more relevant message. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're very right. We do something, and sometimes we do it and we don't know what's on the other end of it. We just know that we have to do it, and we don't get to see the other side of it.
That's right.
And that means that we stepped into it with faith. And faith does get us places, by the way. And in my case, so I have at the back of the book, I have something called matterings. Matterings are these objective principles that I lifted out of the story. Maybe you don't like my story. Maybe you don't like to read stories, but it's at the end, and it's just the objective principles. There are about 200 of them. And I am working on putting those into its own little book or pamphlet or something like that. I also wanted to tell you that I recorded the audiobook.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Studio. Yes. And it's 11 hours. It took me a lot of time. And I want to tell you something. It was a grueling process. I loved it. but when you are voicing something, you have to go back into the story. And I would be sometimes so drained. We would do 2, maybe 3 hours at most. The audio producer would give me water, and he would say, one time he said to me, Shifra, you need to go home and sleep. You just look so tired, so undone. Anyway, that was fun though, really fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is something that I want to be able to do with mine, is do audio, and I haven't. All right. For the past 5 years, I've done nothing but be in compilation books. And like 5 years ago, I wouldn't get in a compilation book. 5 years, because I had a lot of smaller stories that I just wanted to put places, and that worked. So I've not done audio with that, but I wanted to do audio. When I do this news section, I might do audio, but I usually do a program to go with it. So like a help or a guidebook that goes with the book type thing. Is that something that you're going to create too, or no?
So yeah. So first, I just want to say a few things, and then I want to answer that question directly. So I'm trained as a voice artist, among some other things. So it didn't scare me at all to go into the studio and have a mic in front of me. And in some ways, the story, when you voice it in your own voice, that's really the story. On the page, on the page, it's fine. And, you have an author voice, but when you are voicing it in your own voice, literally, that's a whole different, I think, way of influencing somebody. Yes, to answer your question, this is talk about going through a process and not really know where you're going to land. The book came out right as the pandemic was hitting, and the whole book tour was canceled. And I had no way to promote it and to connect with audiences the way I had wanted to. I mean, that's why I wrote the book, and at great personal sacrifice, because it's very personal, and it meant putting myself out there, and which is it means you don't have privacy is a luxury. And I'm a very private person to begin with. So this is very, very challenging. And it was a decision that I made over and over and over again, even to the few days before it was going to be published. I'm like, let's just pull the whole project. Let's just not do it. It's fine. But it wouldn't have been just fine, because there's something inside of me that says, you were here to do this. Now just do it. That said, by the way, there are friends of mine who do not know that I wrote a book.
Yeah. I still have friends saying
that. Okay. But here's what happened. I'm expanding this into something called leadershipthatmatters.org. And I am using the principles of mattering. I've distilled 5 principles of leadership that are the foundation of them is on mattering, and how we build teams, how we build people, how we build teams of people, because teams are just people put together, and how we build them by focusing on mattering. I'll give you one example very briefly. Unity is a principle of mattering. When we insist that everybody shows up individually with their individuality, and not insist on uniformity or conformity, because that kills everybody. When we insist on that, then we get the strongest team possible, because we've catalyzed and evoked and invited the best and the brightest in each person.
Interesting, how your outlook on life, and it comes out through your book. All right. I find your outlook just very interesting to me. It's like intriguing. When you were younger, all right, did you have, I don't know if I want to, how I want to put this. Did you have a struggle when you were younger, all right, fitting in to the world? You know what I mean? Your classmates, your family, things like that.
Love the question. Extremely relevant, because that's really what I wrote in the book. That so I really didn't matter. At least I didn't feel that I mattered, and it's the perception that counts. I think the people in my life are very surprised that I felt that way. But I mean, they now know that, some of the people who have read the book, family. But it's like this. I had an eating disorder. I have a complicated nature to begin with. I'm inclined to give up and to be hopeless. That wasn't learned. I somehow knew that. That wasn't learned hopelessness. And I couldn't process the information, the schoolwork. I actually did well in school, but at a very high cost. I worked very hard. I just couldn't, my mind didn't work the regular way. And it was that the end, most of all, I was compared to an aunt of mine who was personality disordered, and her life didn't seem to matter very much.
Wow.
And I understood that if her life didn't matter and I was compared to her, what did that mean? That meant that my life wouldn't matter either. And that is just the underlying tension that will never, ever go away. But the difference today is that I'm aware of it and I push back. Push back. You gotta fight. You gotta fight it. And every day I make that choice to opt in and fight. So, and sometimes it really feels very easy and sometimes it feels very hard. I have a phrase called learned hopefulness. And to me, that is a combination of a lot of things, including faith. Faith is learned hopefulness. You learn to be hopeful because you're going to be supported, whether it's God who you believe in, your creator, right? You didn't get here alone and you're not here alone.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it alone.
No. And you know, and I ask you that question because as you're revealing that is I've seen some of myself in that. All right. In school, I was a D and F student. Being honest with you, in high school, the concept of getting through high school was like, you know, the things I needed to learn to succeed were this much of high school. And you had to take all that other stuff to get your diploma, which was hard for me, but I did it. I got through it and did it. And for years, didn't talk to anybody I went to school with because I felt like I was the failure and didn't matter to anybody in school. It wasn't until my 30-year high school, my 25th high school reunion that I connected with kids from my school again. And my 30-year high school reunion, I was the MC for the reunion. And I'm like graduate number 287 of 300. All right. And they're having me be now the spokesman talking to a lot of the class. And I'm like, why? Because in school, that thought of not mattering and that thought process of not mattering, putting it into action, going, well, if I don't matter, why even put an effort in? When reality was, I got what I needed to succeed. All the rest was fluff that you got to take to get through school. And once I got past all the fluff and realized it was fluff, I was able to build relationships with people again.
And you know, sometimes I wonder if we destroy our children in the process of educating them, we actually destroy them because we allow them to think erroneously that their mattering is connected to their grades, that the grade is the sum total of who they are. I had a daughter when she was in 4th grade. She brought home a paper. It had an F on the top, F as in failing. And it was.
I'm familiar with F meant. I've got a lot of them.
That's why I said that, because you said that. So the F was on the top of the paper, and now this was in math, and she was actually good in math. But even if she wouldn't have been, I wrote the phrase on top, looking forward, and the F was in the word forward, looking forward to continued success. Now, the teacher probably did not know what to do with that, and maybe she, in her role book, I was a failure, but it was much more important for me to hold the vision for my child. And I want to tell you something just briefly, and that is that holding a vision for somebody means not to be scared for them and not to be scared of them and not to allow them to be scared for themselves. Because every time we have that fear, that it has to be replaced with faith, with a hopefulness, right? That's the challenge. And maybe some people by nature, I know people who by nature are very not fearful. And you know, they show up to life as if it's just all perfect. And they don't necessarily have to work as hard, and that's okay. It's a different nature.
Oh. And I find it interesting, you know, I mean, you know, going through the stories and stuff, you know, I remember, I think one of the turning points was, I was in my early 40s when I actually heard the statement about, and I've been an entrepreneur most of my life because I never fit in a job. But I heard the thing about schooling was A students end up working for C students, and C students end up working for D and F students who create the companies.
I think we see so much evidence of that.
Yeah. So,
Which
and
tells
it's
us
interesting because
which tells us there's a lot of different smarts out there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and the truth is yes, I want my children to have good grades in school, but I remember telling my daughter when she went to college, Jess, the greatest thing you're going to get from college is the relationship. College is the relationships you make and the knowledge you get. You are not going there to get wisdom. You're going there to get knowledge and build relationships. The relationships will carry you farther than the diploma will. And I don't have a college diploma. In my family, my brother one down from me, he went back and got his high school diploma at age 39, went on to college and got at like 40 something, got his bachelor's, and then got a master's. And this was a guy who was smart in school, but basically when life in school, they would give him a hard time because of what he wanted to do. Fine, I'll quit. He walked out of school. And sometimes teaching our kids to stand up for what's right for them and not what's right for what we want is the hardest thing in the world to do. And
it is the only way, though, to create the wholeness, to leave the wholeness in another person intact. There is no other way.
Yeah, exactly. Because, now I see your story and my story and how similar they were of well-meaning people. I mean, I'm not putting down my educators. I'm not putting down my family. They're well-meaning. They wanted me to have a certain thing. But in the reality of it, their idea and my idea were two different ideas. I should say their idea and God's idea, or the universe's idea. All right, we're two different ideas.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we put that expectation on others we shouldn't. So
I want you to know that one of my daughters had a principal. Mm-hmm. So this particular daughter had trouble doing it the conventional way. So she would stay home and shadow me, which frankly was probably a lot more educational for her than going to school. And the principal is an unsung hero as far as I'm concerned, because while he had a school to run, a very large school actually, he was able to understand the individual. He stayed out of the way. He encouraged us to do what we needed to do for this particular child, applauded us, even sent us a letter in the mail encouraging us. And I to this day, we continue to find this incredible and unfortunately not so easy to find.
Yeah. Wow. I think, you and I could go on in a conversation for hours. I get the feeling because just in a conversation, right? Like I don't feel like I'm interviewing you now. Now I feel like we're just having a conversation. And that is exactly what I wanted this show to originally be. So
that's what an interview is. It's just two humans talking.
It is. But like, I want to find out more about you.
Ask. You want me to ask the questions? I'll tell you what I'd ask myself if you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me ask you this. So, when it comes into future projects, all right, there's a couple questions I like to end up my interviews with. One of them is future projects. Are you looking down the road 5 years? This is what I'm going to try to do now. Or are you looking at that? Or are you kind of going, you know what? I'm going to see where this takes me.
Of course I am. I happen to be a very enterprising person, and and I'm also, I have a very strong spiritual side, without which I would not have ever gotten to this point in my life at all. So combining those two things, I am on the lookout for opportunities to how to build my Leadership That Matters organization, in which I serve as a catalyst for emerging and growing leaders, helping them to understand what it is they're trying to do and help them to do it. I have a lot of experience helping to build teams of people and running initiatives from beginning to end, and just directing all the different pieces and orchestrating them all. So yes, I am, but I can't say specifically what they are because they're unfolding.
So, Shifra, I write my goals down on a piece of paper like this, and then usually
Yeah.
next Saturday, it's, well, time to redo that.
Yeah, no. So like I'll give you one concrete
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I'm working on a seminar called the Great Will Seminar, which is essentially very basic communication for how we answer our phones in a business and how we do emails. I am astounded sometimes at the lack of professionalism in an email.
Oh,
And
you're not going to pick on my emails now, are you?
no, yours were great. Yours were great. But I'm
Mine are a little lacking in professionalism, but they get anyway. I want you to go with your lesson on this, and we'll talk on that later.
You know what? We had this interesting conversation around the table a few weeks ago. My daughter had some friends over, and this was the question: what would you want to be complimented on? What would be a meaningful compliment for somebody to give you? And then I said to them, just this week, somebody gave me I asked the question because this is what happened.
Yeah.
Somebody gave me a compliment. She said, I had been working on a very detailed project. So the compliment she gave me is, you are like the master email writer. And that's a nice compliment, but it really wasn't so meaningful because in the context of all the other things that I was doing, I was like, can we do a little better than that? And not that I'm looking for compliments, but everybody wants to feel that what they did, that their accomplishment or their achievement was, help the team. Anyway, we went around the table and we asked, so what would be meaningful to you? And what they said was, these are 20-year-olds. What they said is something that's not external, something that's intrinsic about a quality of who I am. Not what I have, not what I've done, but who I am.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting for 20-year-olds.
For 20 years, yeah. So, anyway,
what would be your answer? I'm just curious, Tim. I can't let us go on until I hear your answer.
Repeat the question so my listeners know exactly what question I'm answering.
Exactly, of course. What would be a meaningful compliment that somebody could give you?
Tim, every time I'm in your presence, all right, I walk away feeling uplifted.
There you go. That's great. Wow.
Yeah. Because that's
so then we know who you are. So we know your values. We know how critical it is for you at night, by the time you are finished your day, to say, I uplifted somebody.
Yeah.
I made a difference in somebody's life.
Yeah. That's truly what does matter. Yeah. So, and the emails that I wrote, right. So my famous line is, hey, hey, and I tell you your name. And some people say, is that professional? And I got that from, I'm not good with always placing, because I meet so many people, placing a face and a name instantly. So I get you know what I mean? Hey guy, hi sweetie. And then while I'm thinking what their name is, it paused me for a second as how I got that. And I realized for me, it's always been set yourself up so that you don't fail, as opposed to, hi, and you stumble over their name. I just say something like that while I'm thinking what their name is. So, and then usually it comes back to me. So that's I created that habit, and someone always says, well, is that professional, your emails? If you get my newsletter, I send it the first email that goes out that says, so this is how I address people. Not meaning to be disrespectful or anything like that. So when you talk about,
it's all good.
Yeah. But we talk about professionalism, is me, for professionalism in my email was getting my message across, not dilly-dallying in why I was writing you. Like, I read marketing emails, and I'm sure you do too, that are like, 2 pages long to try to get you in a trance so they can sell to you. You know what I mean? I don't do those type of emails. I just can't. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm not really a tranceable person. If there's such a word, I make up words all the time. So I'm not a tranceable person, but so I wouldn't write those kind of emails either.
Yeah, no, it's like we do that when we like. So, well, there's a couple other questions I want to ask you here before we come to a close. One of them was that I ask everybody is, in the 1980s, I worked at a gas station in Massachusetts where a boss gave me job advice that now becomes something that I live my life by. All right. And at the time, he was just telling me to do my job, pretend like you own the company while you're here. And that caused me to take ownership of everything I do. Good, bad, or ugly, I take ownership. And it's from that little piece of advice he gave me. Did someone give you advice like that when you were younger that maybe directs you life, or it's become a foundation for you?
Honestly, I've had to give myself my own best advice. That's the truth. And the advice is dare to matter. You show up into your life as if you matter and as if what you do matters, because it will and it does. That's
Cool.
it. That's it. There's only two ways to show up into life. Either it matters or it doesn't.
Yeah, you're right. So cool. So one other question that I put in, and I got to find a way to not put this as the ending questions.
Well, don't worry. I have an ending question for you. So
okay, cool. So it'll work out.
Word.
As I told you earlier, I interviewed my friend Rob over the summer. And for a lot of people in Rob's network of people worldwide, my interview was the last chance a lot of people got to come and find out and hear one last word from Rob. There are people out there who are going to find this interview because of the way it's set up on the internet. It's going to always be there. All right. And they're going to search you out and they're going to find you after you're gone. What is the one message you want to say to them?
I want you to understand that no one has to tell you that you matter. If you are here on this world, that is a message that you matter, or you wouldn't be here. Yeah. So don't judge today and tomorrow. That's very short-sighted. It takes a lifetime to be able to really understand your influence. And maybe you won't even get to know that in your lifetime. Maybe it happens afterwards.
Yeah. Cool.
That's what I want you to know. And I have a question for you. Are you finished?
All right, go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead. Shoot.
You promised me more questions.
I promised you more questions?
You did, but that's okay because I have a question for you. Bazinga, what does that mean?
Actually, it comes from the TV show Big Bang Theory, and it was like his Sheldon's joke word or something like that. When he plays a joke on you, he says Bazinga. And I know where you got it from.
Let's tell your audience. Yes.
I want to tell my audience, but I don't because that gives away. I'll have to go change the word now because I put a secret word at the end of my videos to find out if people watch them.
Oh no, I'm sorry that I made.
No, that's I have to re-record that video because that video is over a year old, by the way.
It's a great video. Nicely done. Very nicely done.
So yeah, for the listeners, so you know, all right, everybody who comes on the show goes through a process to do it, and it's all email and video driven. I did not write any emails to you, Shifra, before you got on the air today. They were all pre-written. Some of those emails were pre-written 3 years ago, and you're in an automated process that gets you on the air. And I do that because I've always loved Larry King's idea of interviewing people. Larry King never did research on who you were and what you were. He wanted to get to know you when the cameras were on. And I was like, I like that idea because it keeps you on your toes. I did an interview one time where I was following questions on the early days, and I quit doing it because you're always trying to miss the cue to ask the next question they told you to ask. And I didn't like that. I want to listen to what you're talking about and then take the thoughts in my head and direct the next question. Yeah, which, as you see, I did today.
It's fluid. Yes, you did a wonderful job. And I really... let's continue the conversation another time. And I do want to tell you that if you really want to know about Shifra Malka, listen to the 180-second book trailer that's on my site, shiframalka.com.
Cool. All right. So, yeah, tell them the website one more time, and then I'm going to play my little game with you before we go.
Okay. shiframalka.com. You could also go to daretomatter.org, and that will take you straight to shiframalka.com.
Cool. So, well, before you go, all right, I have a game called This or That. I have 5 envelopes here. You pick 3 of them, and I'm going to ask you the questions in those envelopes.
Now, how am I supposed to pick it? Just point, or should I say a number?
1, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Let's do 3.
3? You get 2 more. Pick 2 more envelopes.
Let's do 1 and 5.
Oh, I got to make sure I do the right 1.
I'll never know.
Because I'm looking at it. You got to realize I'm looking at the camera reversed.
I know. Yes. But you know what I want to know? I'm sorry. I'm just very curious. I want to know what everyone else picks. Do they all pick 3 as the first one?
A lot of people pick 3 at the first one.
Yeah. Okay.
And I used to have, I'm just downgrading it now to 5. I used to do 7, right? And I just downgraded it because I'm trying to shorten. I'm trying to make the process simple and easy, like my trademark says.
I just want you to know that if you would have had 7, I would have picked 7 first.
I know.
I thought you should know that. It's very important.
Okay. Well, let's take this one. Your envelope first was 3. Envelope number 3. Question number 1. Do you remember the movie Matrix? And if you do, would you pick the red pill or the blue pill?
I don't know that movie, but I probably would have picked the
The
red.
one was reality. Like I want reality. The other one is put me back into a sleep. And I think that was the red pill, was back into a sleep.
Well, I chose red, and I guess I chose that right.
Yeah. Okay. Question number 2. Fast food, Taco Bell or McDonald's?
Taco Bell.
Oh, I'm a McDonald's guy, so I was wondering.
Except that I just should tell you something. I keep kosher, so I probably wouldn't have either of those.
Yeah,
but, between a kosher taco and a kosher hamburger, I'd pick that taco.
I know. I have other things in here that might relate to this. I've got, I don't know what the other questions are in the envelope until I open.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Question number 3: Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Star Wars. Were you like 70s Star Wars person, or?
A little bit. I'm not too much into science fiction, but between those two.
Yeah, I fell into Star Wars because of the later series, and then I went back to watch the original and realized they were better. So
yeah, I liked more of Grease and those kind of productions.
Yeah, me too. Maybe one of these days I'll actually put a question in there of comedies, movies. Anyway, envelope number 1. Question number 1. In your car now, do you listen to podcasts or music?
I listen to both.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Through the pandemic, I got hooked on Mike Rowe's podcast, the guy who does Dirty Jobs. He has a podcast called The Way I Heard It or something like that, very similar to Paul Harvey concept. And and that became my thing, to listen to podcasts in the car.
You just have to understand that I do a lot of singing and dancing in my life. And that just moves me through my life. And so in the car, sometimes I'll do the podcast, but sometimes I just need to sing.
I was worried that you're going to tell me you danced in the car while you drove.
I figured you'd figure out that I really didn't dance while I was driving, but
hey, I was a D&F student. I was a D&F student. I wasn't that bright. Question number 2: high heels or boots?
High heels.
I figured you for a high heels girl. I don't know why. So
yeah.
Question number 3: at the movies, do you eat popcorn or candy?
Both.
Both?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a person on here 2 weeks ago who told me they get the M&Ms and they dump the M&Ms in the popcorn and then shake it all up.
There you go. Why settle for one when you can have both?
I know. So anyway, last envelope, number 5. Let's see if we get any good. You didn't get any of the dirty questions. You made out.
I don't think they're. I suspect that all the questions were fair play.
They are, but some there's a boy question versus the high heels boots question is the girl question, and I have girl questions and boy questions, and sometimes now by doing it this way, sometimes the girls get the boy question, sometimes the boys get the girl question, and it's fun. I used to write it down for every interview, but now I did this with an envelope, so you choose. So
I have a chapter in my book about my boyfriend and why I chose him. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That would have been a fun question to get, but what's the question I got?
Next one here is watching the movies. Do you rather watch them at home or at the theater now?
Mostly at home.
Mostly at home? Okay.
Honestly, the theaters are still closed.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of them are open down here, but mostly I like watching movies at home now because I have a better sound system now at home. But I'm still waiting now, I think 3 years for the new Top Gun to come out. I will see that in the theater. So.
But the theaters today are just so inviting. The seats go back, and you can just literally go to sleep. So,
yeah. So a couple years ago, when I did my first blog and video con, my coach used to work for the band Guns N' Roses, And we went at my first event. He spoke at it, and we went right after my event to see the Bohemian Rhapsody Story of Queen. And he is personal friends with Brian May. And him and I are sitting side by side in the theater, and he's on his phone texting Brian May while we're watching the movie about Brian May. And I'm like, oh my God. It was just like one of the most coolest moments.
That is so cool. Oh my. Yes.
You can't, that's a theater experience I will never forget, right? So I can read the text that Brian May is sending him. That's how close we're sitting. So yeah. Question number 2, related to, very close to our similar one, past one. Which would you rather have, a hamburger or a taco?
What's the difference between that question?
I know though. The previous question was McDonald's or Taco Bell.
Oh, okay. As far as I'm concerned, there are 2 food groups. Yeah. There's steak and there's ice cream.
That may be the new quotable for the show.
That is out of all the quotes.
Yeah. I love it because, like, I asked that question. I threw McDonald's in there because growing up, I loved McDonald's, and when I was homeless, McDonald's dollar burgers is how I ate. But then I get people. I mean, now I live in the South and I like tacos, and people will go like, I have people come on the show. They're like vegans, and they're like, "Well, I'm a vegan." I'm like, I'm not a vegan, but I've had vegan tacos, and I'm telling you, they're awesome. Because they'll look at that question and go, well, I can't answer that question because I'm a vegan. I'm like, wrong. Vegan tacos, dude.
Yes.
They're awesome. And I'm not a vegan.
How much do tacos cost? Are they?
You know what? We do a thing down here, Taco Tuesdays, through a taco place down here. And I usually get them for like $2 a piece. Nice. Uh-huh. So I do one more question and I'll tell you the story. The last one is Christmas or Halloween?
So, I'm Jewish, so
I know you're Jewish, but again, sometimes you get the questions.
Hang on, but I would say this. I would say Halloween is a time when I've never celebrated that because we have something in Judaism that's Purim, which is where we masquerade. It has a different meaning to it.
Yes.
But there's something in masquerading that sometimes reveals the truth. So to me, that would hold some meaning. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think we see with the whole mask that we've been in for the past few years, somehow it unmasked something about human beings that I find very valuable.
Yeah, yeah.
No. And I worry about the lipstick companies because we didn't have to put on our lipsticks under the masks. I wonder how they're doing.
A perspective many people probably have never thought about. So anyway. Well, I mean, it's interesting because, we talked about that and a lot of things there. Like one of my clients is a Disney Imagineer, and she loves Halloween because she's all about decorating up for Halloween. I love Christmas. I have like a 1,200 square foot condo, and I win our condo complex's Christmas decorations every year. I think I have like 10,000 lights I put in our 1,200 square foot condo.
How long does it take you to put all that
up? It takes me a day and a half to set it all up.
Wow.
I set it up myself. I take it down myself. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and
that's your way of bringing light to the world.
It is. It's my way of like we said earlier. All right. I want the day to leave that you were inspired to see me. And I remember kids coming by to see it, and it just impressed me. And when we move out of the condo, move to a house, I'll come up with a whole different arrangement for the house again. Because that's one time I love doing it. So, and that's why. So you got to do things. And the condo we live in is in the same complex. We used to have a smaller one, and we bought this one. And for years, I was number 2 in the contest. And I am now number 1 because the lady who was number 1 for years and I couldn't beat, she passed away. So I bought her condo.
That's one way to do it.
I still put decorations of hers. Like I kept some of her decorations I bought them from the family. And I still put some of her decorations up with mine every year. So, I mean, I'm on the board for the HOA, and I actually made a nomination to call our Christmas award to name it after her. All right, and that every year, and that's what they're doing. So
that is very nice.
I believe. I mean, she was the Christmas person in this complex that far more me, and I love the house, but I would have rather had her around.
Of course, and when you look at those lights, they obviously have a message for you that you're trying to share with others, right? Right. So. What is that message?
All right. Well, we went way longer than I thought we would today.
Okay.
I do want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule, be on my show, share with my audience. I appreciate that so much.
Thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure having a good conversation.
Cool.
Take
So,
good care.
Yep. To you guys, listeners, I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. Go check out Shifra at her website. And how's the last name pronounced again?
Malka.
Shiframalka.com. It's on the screen. It will be in the comments as well. All right. For those of you on the audio. All right. Come back next week where we'll have another great guest. In the meantime, guys, have a great day. Bye.